Hello, everyone. I'm John, and welcome back to ASMR True Crime Story, where I share true stories in a calm, relaxing whisper. Before we begin, press a number in the comments for me. Press 1 if you're already part of our ASMR family. Press 0 if this is your first time here. And press 2 if you want another whispered true story in the next upload. If you're enjoying the calm, please like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss tomorrow's case. Now, get comfortable, settle in, and slow your breathing. Let's begin. Story 1. Midnight settled over the island like a soft blanket of rain. Streetlights blurred in the wet as a tall 16-year-old drifted along the high street with a paper bag of hot chips in his hand. He paused at a bus stop. He turned back toward the glow of shop windows. Cameras caught him once more at 12:06 a.m. After that, there was only darkness. Ferries were not running, roads were quiet. Somehow, the boy was simply gone. His name was Damien Richard Nettles. He was born on June 21st, 1980, far from the English coast in Singapore. He was one of 4 children in a close family. His mother, Valerie, had grown up on the Isle of Wight. His father, Ed, worked in international sales, a job that meant moves across countries and oceans. There was an older sister, Sarah. There was a younger brother, James. There was a little sister, Melissa. The children knew suitcases and new schools. They also knew a home life that felt warm and steady wherever they were. In 1991, when Damien was 10, the family settled on the Isle of Wight. They lived at the very top of the island, in a village close to the ferries. It was the kind of place where faces were familiar and news traveled quickly. Ed worked in London during the week and returned on weekends. Valerie anchored the home, and the siblings stayed tight with one another. Damien grew tall early. People often guessed he was older than his years. He followed Sarah around as a small child and adored her. He made people laugh without being unkind. He had a gentle streak and a habit of trying to help. He was shy, more comfortable watching than speaking in crowds, and music helped him find his voice. He taught himself guitar. He learned lyrics by heart. He played trombone in the school orchestra. With friends, he formed a small band. As exams neared, his focus sharpened. He spoke about studying marine biology one day. He loved the sea, its creatures, and ideas bigger than the island horizon. Saturday, November 2nd, 1996 began as ordinary. That evening, around 7:15 p.m., Ed dropped Damien at the home of his friend Chris on Grange Road, East Cowes. Damien had a curfew, midnight. He was expected home. He usually kept that rule. If he planned a sleepover, he would say so. He said nothing this time. The next morning, the home felt as it always did on a Sunday. Valerie and Ed were up, moving quietly, easing into the day. 9-year-old Melissa played with her toys and watched cartoons. 12-year-old James slept in. Damien should have been sleeping too. Valerie heard James stirring. She sent Melissa to wake her big brother. Melissa bounded down the hall, expecting to tease him into the day. She returned with wide eyes and said, "He's not there." Valerie went to the room herself. The bed was neatly made. Nothing looked touched since the night before. Her mind reached for a simple answer. He must have stayed at Chris's house. He would call soon. She tried to calm the shake in her chest. This was out of character, but she told herself to wait a little. Minutes stretched. She paced to the window, listening for a familiar step on the path, hoping for the phone to ring. It did not. Finally, she called Chris. The line rang and rang. When Chris answered, he sounded groggy, pulled from sleep. No, Damien was not there. He had left around 10:30. They had parted ways near the steps toward the park. Chris was sure Damien had headed home. The calm broke. Valerie and Ed called every number they could think of. No one had seen Damien. Valerie got in the car and drove through the streets she knew by heart, tracing likely routes, scanning pavements, checking bus stops, hoping to spot her son. Rain swept across the island. Wind pressed at the windows. She drove anyway. Nothing. Her parents came to help. They watched James and Melissa so Valerie and Ed could search again. They walked and drove along the coastal paths through East Cowes town center, across quiet neighborhoods. Hours passed and still no sign. At 3 p.m., Valerie took Melissa to Cowes police station to report Damien missing. The station doors were locked. She could see a patrol car in the lot and a uniformed officer speaking outside. She knocked hard. She called out. No one came. She phoned the main headquarters on the island. A voice said the station was unmanned. While she was still on the call, someone opened the station door. There had been someone inside, within earshot of the knocks. She went in and told them her 16-year-old son was missing. She described the morning, the silence, the neat bed. She asked what would happen next. The answer was to go home and wait. Teenagers stay out sometimes, she was told. Another voice added, "You know what boys are like." She left with a deep, cold worry that would not let go. In the days that followed, the family made calls and knocked on doors. Friends arrived to help. Sarah came back from university on the mainland. James's and Melissa's routines bent around the search. Valerie phoned the police again and again. She was told not to call so often. A friend of the family, Dr. Karen Lawrence, walked the high street and went business to business, asking if anyone had seen the tall boy with the dark hair on Saturday night. At Yorkie's chip shop, she found a camera mounted above the door. The owner allowed her to check. On the footage, there was Damien ordering food the night he vanished. Dr. Lawrence gave the tape to the police. 5 other men were in the shop at the same time. For a long while, those men were not identified. No statements were taken from them. It was said they looked like ordinary customers. Perhaps they were. Even so, they were present in a place and moment now important. There were other cameras along the high street, 7 more, Valerie believed. The family pushed for the footage to be gathered. Some tapes were watched and notes were taken. Some were lost. One was recorded over after being left in a machine. Phone logs from the night went missing. Duty notebooks were not kept. There was no record of which officers were working that night. It felt like threads of time were sliding through open fingers. When Valerie asked to view the recorded images, she was told the pictures were too blurry to be useful. She asked to see them anyway. Officers showed her a figure they had been tracking from camera to camera. It was not her son. She said so. She then started from the beginning and traced the tall boy she knew through the frames. From those images and witness accounts, a timeline formed. After Ed dropped Damien at Chris's, the boys went with Chris's brother to a house party on the same street. It was quiet there. 3 couples and Damien. He grew bored. People later said he may have had a little to drink. There was a talk of cannabis smoke at the gathering. It was teenage life, a familiar background in many places. Around 9:20 p.m., Damien and Chris left for the ferry terminal. They wanted to cross to West Cowes and walk into town. Before the ferry, Damien went into a convenience store called All Days. Chris waited outside. Damien hoped to buy some cider. He was tall and often mistaken for older. Inside, he saw his ex-girlfriend, Abby. They had ended their relationship in July after a long time together for their age. She said he looked a little drunk and had no money. She did not have any to lend. On the ferry, 2 school friends noticed the pair. Damien seemed cheerful and chatty. He had clearly been drinking, but he did not appear unsteady. He carried a bag with glass bottles and a small black camera. That camera was never found later. In West Cowes, they tried to get into the pubs. Chris waited outside while Damien tried his luck for entry. Sometimes he stepped inside for a minute, often to be turned away again. He told more than one person he was trying to find his sister Sarah. Valerie would later say Damien knew Sarah was on the mainland at university that weekend. At 10 p.m., a camera at Yorkie's recorded Damien stepping inside, picking up a salt shaker, speaking a few words, and leaving. Staff watching him thought he looked as if he were on something stronger than alcohol. At 10:10 p.m., a witness saw him outside an arcade across from the chip shop, sharing a cigarette with someone and holding a bottle. Both looked drunk. The witness said Damien seemed moody. At 10:20 p.m., another witness saw him outside the Fountain pub with chips in his hand. He was on his own and looked quite drunk. Around 10:30 p.m., the owner of the Fountain remembered a young man being told to take his food outside. He seemed under the influence of something, but not simply alcohol. At the same time, Chris had grown cold and wet in the worsening weather. He wanted to head home. He said goodbye near the steps that led to Northwood Park. He was sure Damien would cut through the park and go back to East Cowes. Instead, Damien drifted back to the high street. At 10:45 p.m., a person who knew Damien saw him standing by the Midland Bank, eating chips. The boy's speech was slurred. He had trouble following the conversation. The witness invited him to join friends at the Fountain. When they arrived, Damien was refused entry. At 11:10 p.m., another person said a young man asked for a cigarette outside the Harbor Lights pub. The same young man then tried the door of a blue Ford Fiesta as if to get in. When asked if he had permission, he said no and walked away. At 11:20 p.m., the manager of the Three Crowns said Damien came around a side alley toward a door, looking for a way into the pub. Staff told him the pub was closed. He replied that he was looking for his sister Sarah. They asked him to leave, and he did. At 11:30 p.m., he returned to Yorkie's. This is the most studied footage. 5 men waited for their orders as Damien went to the counter. He struggled to form sentences. He kept saying, "One, please." He said please and thank you, even as his words fell apart. A staff member named Rob believed it was not simple drunkenness. Another, Sharon, said they knew what drunkenness looked like, and this seemed different. Damien left with food and walked north along the high street. At 11:52 p.m., staff saw him again walk south, back past the shop. He waved. Around that same time, a local bus driver said a spaced-out young man carrying chips and a camera climbed aboard and asked, "Are you going to Cowes?" The driver said, "We are already in Cowes." The boy tried to take a photo, failed, thanked the driver, and got off as if he had arrived somewhere. Again, he said thank you. At 11:59 p.m., a driver waiting to pick up a relative saw a teenage boy huddled against the rain, out eating chips. The boy approached the car and said, "They're watching us." He then walked around the vehicle and wiped rainwater from the windows with his sleeve before heading back toward the high street. At 12:06 a.m., a camera at Yorkie's caught Damien walking toward a bus stop, then back along the street, eating chips. That was the last confirmed image. Within weeks, a theory took root that he had fallen into the water or tried to swim to the mainland and drowned. Their out home could have taken him along the seafront, just a short walk from the high street. Another route would have taken him through the park. Water was close either way. But the harbor master, Captain Henry Wrigley, studied the tide and the likely drift. He said that if Damien had gone into the water that night, the currents would have returned him to shore. No trace was ever found in the water. Despite that, the water theory stayed on the table. Valerie and her friend Dr. Lawrence were once described as hysterical women for pressing for more. The word stung. The work continued. Years passed in the rhythm of searching and hoping and hearing rumors that went nowhere. 14 months after the night in question, the police conducted the first broad door-to-door search near the Nettles home. It was January 1998. 26 officers and 6 dogs checked sheds, outhouses, flats, houses, and nearby woods, places James and Ed and Valerie's father had searched in the first days. The police said they were acting on new information. At 12:30 a.m., a witness had seen a tall youth walking along Bering Road toward the top of the street where the Nettles lived. Valerie later said that account had been reported in the weeks after Damien vanished and had been dismissed at the time. Nothing came from the search. Stories grew in the absence of answers. Some said a body had been hidden in the foundation of a block of flats. Some said the boy had been taken to an old mine. Some said he had been harmed while trying to protect a friend and that a fire had erased traces. In 1999, there was a rumor about a visiting offender with a history of crimes against children. That person had left the island months before, November 1996. In 2002, another convicted individual claimed knowledge of a serious crime on the island in the 90s. A search of a field found nothing, and the claim was judged false. A local counselor, Lynn Hampton, said she believed Damien and another boy were taken to a chalet near Gurnard Marsh by 2 repeat offenders, and that harm had been done and evidence destroyed in a blue drum. That claim remains unproven. A boy in Damien's circle said Damien had become caught up in the local substance scene, that an attack had occurred, and that a burial site existed near Northwood House. He later denied saying this. People who knew Damien spoke about late summer and early autumn changes. Abby said that before they parted in July, she had seen flickers of someone different, older friends, new places, secrets. She wondered if substances were involved. After August, Damien dated Gemma. She later said the police did not ask her about any of that side of his life. In 2007, the family hired a private investigator named Dave Edwards. The police sent a constable to his house to say they did not want him to look into the case. Edwards continued anyway. Over 5 years, he knocked on doors and listened. One name surfaced again and again, Nicky McNamara. He was known on the island for dealing. In 1996, he was part of a small group involved in the trade of illegal substances. He died in 2002. Heroin had been injected into his back. He lay in a bathtub for several days before he was found. His partner, Shelley Barr, had been in the home. The coroner called the death an accidental overdose and noted troubling circumstances. When Valerie said the name Nicky at home, James reacted at once. He had been to a party at that house after Damien vanished. When Nicky learned James was Damien's brother, he became agitated and insisted James leave. James filed it away as odd at the time. He also remembered being taunted at school by people linked to that house. They shouted a cruel line about fish bait. He kept it to himself then. He did not want to hurt his family with words meant to wound. Melissa remembered that Nicky's daughter, a year older at school, began asking her questions about what the police were saying about Damien. The question stuck in Melissa's mind. Chris admitted that he and Damien had once bought substances at a house on Fellows Road, where Nicky and an associate, Bunny Ellis, had been linked. Chris said Damien was open to experimenting beyond cannabis, pills, psychedelics. He was, Chris said, the kind of person who might try something if someone he trusted said it was good. Not because he chased danger, but because he was curious and keen to fit in. A witness told Edwards he had seen Nicky pinning a tall, slim youth against a wall on Borthwood Road around the time Damien disappeared. Another man, Daniel Spencer, was said to have been present. When asked later, Daniel denied it. A different witness, speaking about Daniel, said that when Daniel drank, he talked about Damien and often repeated a phrase, "No body, no crime." The BBC later reported speaking to 10 people who knew Daniel. All felt he knew something about the disappearance. A separate private investigator said a source told him Daniel referred to Damien with a small nickname. These were words and suspicions, not proof. Shelley Barr told Dave Edwards that Nikki and an associate had picked up Damien near a ferry on the night he vanished. She also warned him that if he told anyone she had said that, she would have him harmed. She later denied saying any of it. The place she named, Bering Road, was where that 12:30 a.m. sighting had been reported, the one that led to the delayed search in 1998. A witness claimed that on the night in question, Damien called up to a flat on Tennyson Road, a well-known party place, trying to buy. Nikki had been bound to that address in 1996 for a separate offense. The attempt to buy, the witness said, could have placed him in harm's path. In 2010, an informant contacted James directly. He said he had given the same information to the police in 2002 and felt it had not been acted upon. He had known Nikki in the 90s. He said there had been a fight over cannabis. He said a punch in anger led to a death that no one meant to cause. He said a body was hidden in a drug den on Fellows Road, the same place Chris had named. He said the body stayed there for 3 weeks, then was placed in a sailbag and buried along a cycle path. Valerie said the story never changed in detail and felt believable. The police searched the cycle track from Newport to Cowes with dogs. Nothing was found. On May 10th, 2011, several addresses on the island were raided. 5 people were arrested. Search teams moved to a chalet on Marsh Road owned by a dealer linked to Nikki. A 35-year-old woman and a 44-year-old man were arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit a serious offense. The Major Crime Department, the Dog Unit, Scientific Services, and the Island Support Unit searched for 2 days. They found nothing. Those arrested were released without charge. The raid stirred memories. A witness dubbed the Weatherman came forward. He said that in the days before the disappearance, he had seen Nikki acting erratically and talking about a substance he had never heard of. In the days after, he said Nikki looked worn down and said, "I'm a damned man." Later that same day, the witness said he saw Nikki moving an oil drum at the chalet on Marsh Road. The account was detailed. Valerie felt there was weight to it. No evidence was recovered to match it. The 5 arrested that May were kept on long bail. Charges never followed. The case drifted back to quiet. It has long been said that Damien was buried in a copse in Grenard, a small wooded patch. A former dealer linked to Nikki said he had been told the same and had seen Nikki and others loading a large sailbag into a car days after the disappearance. The police called that man a time waster and did not search. The Nettles family searched themselves with a cadaver dog and a hired digger. They found nothing. At home, seasons turned, birthdays passed. Sarah, James, and Melissa grew up with a space next to them that never closed. Valerie gave interviews over the years. Her words stayed clear and soft, even when the ache showed through. The worst thing, she said, was not knowing, not having a place to go, not having a marker, not having a goodbye. Finding his body, or what's left of it, would be a gift, she said once. A gift. To be able to stop the pictures the mind invents in the dark and lay one true picture down. She spoke about time as a weight, about being pulled to a quiet corner with a phone or a laptop, the search never really ending. She said the family had been cheated of a normal life, not because Damien got into trouble, not because teenagers are perfect, but because the response on that first day and the days after felt thin. Doors stayed shut. Tapes were lost. A large search waited 14 months. The investigator they hired was told to stop and kept going anyway. Theories linger because proof does not. Water, running away, substances, and older men who took advantage. Most people close to the case do not believe he left the island by ferry that night. The ferries had stopped. They do not believe he ran away. He kept his curfew. He called home if plans changed. The family had dinner waiting on Sundays. They do not believe the water took him without leaving a trace. So the story rests in the last clear images. A tall boy, kind to the people he met that night, even when his mind was foggy, saying please and thank you to shop staff, thanking a bus driver for a ride that went nowhere, wiping rain from a stranger's car windows, whispering, "They're watching us," to a man waiting in the dark, carrying a little camera that never turned up again, drifting in and out of the frames of a few aging cameras until the film ran out. The island remains small. People remember. Some avoid eye contact. Some stop Valerie in the street and share a memory or a rumor they had thought was nothing. Each new account is weighed, measured, compared to maps and tides and timetables that never change. The same names return, the same places: Fellows Road, Tennyson Road, Marsh Road, Bering Road, the High Street in the rain, the cycle track between Newport and Cowes, the small wooden Gurnard. No court closed the file. No official timeline ends with a found set of answers. What remains is a mother's steady voice, a family's insistence that this boy mattered, and a community that still says his name. On some nights when the rain falls just so and the lights blur in the windows, it is easy to imagine him there again, tall, polite, trying to make people laugh, and just as easy to feel the quiet where he should be. If anyone on that small island knows what happened between one camera frame and the next, the distance is not far. A short walk, a ferry ride that never left the dock, a few steps down an alley, a room on the second floor where the light was still on. The story waits for someone to finish it. Until then, the last clear moment is simple. A teen on a rain-dark street, chips warm in his hand, turning once more toward home. And then, silence. And that is where Damien's trail goes cold. Decades have passed, and still, no answers. If you've stayed with me this far, press 3 in the comments, so I'll know you're ready for the next quiet mystery. And if you haven't already, subscribe and tap the little bell, so you never miss the next story I whisper to you. Now, let's move into our second case for tonight. Story 2. Christina Victoria Grimmie was born into a close-knit family in the quiet suburbs of Marlton, New Jersey. From her earliest days, there was something luminous about her. Her family noticed it first, the way her small hands would wander to the piano keys, pressing them not with the clumsy impatience of a child, but with an oddly deliberate care. The sound she made was not yet music, but the intent was there. Even before she understood melody, she was searching for it. Her parents, Albert and Tina, nurtured that spark, and Tina especially became her steady anchor. Always there, encouraging, guiding, never letting Christina forget that her talent was not just a gift, but also a responsibility. Her older brother, Mark, played a different role. He was the shield, the quiet protector who watched out for his little sister in school, at church, and later in the chaotic world she would step into. Music filled their home. It was not the background hum of a radio playing in another room. It was alive, woven into the rhythm of their family life. Albert had his favorites, the old rock classics. Tina loved soft, soulful ballads. Christina absorbed all of it, storing it away like a library of sounds she could call upon later. By the time she was 5, her curiosity about the piano had grown into a real skill. She learned quickly, often by ear, sitting for hours in the living room, figuring out how to make the notes match the songs she heard. It wasn't just the piano. Her voice, pure, clear, and unforced, began to take shape as if it had always been there, waiting for her to discover it. School life for Christina was quiet. She was not the loudest or the most outgoing, but those who knew her remember a warmth that drew people in. Teachers described her as polite, focused, and unusually mature for her age. Friends noticed her generosity, the way she celebrated their successes without envy, the way she seemed genuinely happy to see others happy. She sang in church, small performances at first. Each time, her confidence grew. Standing in front of a crowd never rattled her. If anything, it seemed to calm her. The nerves that others felt on stage, the shaking hands, the dry mouth, never quite found her. When she sang, she was at home. By the time she reached her early teens, Christina's world was beginning to open. YouTube was still in its early years, but she saw what it could be. A way to share her voice beyond the walls of her home, beyond her church, beyond her town. Mark helped her record and upload videos. It was a team effort. She performed, he handled the technical side. The first videos were simple. Christina sitting at a keyboard, singing covers of songs she loved. The lighting wasn't perfect, the audio was basic, but the voice cut through everything. People noticed, her channel began to grow. The comments came in from strangers, not just friends and family. They talked about her tone, her control, the way her voice seemed to hold more emotion than her years should allow. At home, nothing changed. Christina still did her chores, still hung out with friends, still laughed with her brother over small, silly things. Fame, even in its earliest form, didn't touch her. She stayed grounded, always reminding herself that singing was a gift, not a guarantee. Looking back, those early years seemed peaceful. They were the slow, steady building of a foundation. The family, the values, the discipline, the love for music. All of it forming the base she would carry into everything that came next. No one knew then how far her voice would travel, or how many lives it would touch. But in that small house in Marlton, the first notes of her story were already playing. As Christina's early YouTube uploads began to circulate, something started to shift. It was subtle at first, a few more comments, a steady trickle of new subscribers. But within months, her videos began spreading beyond the small circle of viewers who had stumbled across her channel by chance. Her covers were not just note-for-note imitations. She reimagined songs, stripping them back to their emotional core. When she played, her fingers seemed to breathe along with the keys. When she sang, it felt personal, as if she was speaking directly to the person listening on the other side of the screen. Mark continued to be her closest collaborator. He filmed her performances, adjusted camera angles, and made sure the uploads went live on schedule. The two of them treated it seriously, like a shared project they both believed in. They talked about which songs to cover next, how to improve sound quality, and how to respond to the growing audience. One of her earliest breaks came when she covered Miley Cyrus's Party in the USA. The video began attracting views faster than any of her earlier uploads. Soon after, she recorded a version of Just a Dream by Nelly, a collaboration with another YouTube musician. That performance exploded, drawing millions of views. Her audience began to expand internationally. People from other countries left messages telling her how her voice had found them in moments of loneliness, how her songs had given them something to hold on to. Christina read as many comments as she could, often replying herself. She didn't treat her growing fame as a wall between her and her listeners. She treated it as a bridge. By 2011, she was no longer just another teenager posting videos online. Her name was circulating in the digital music world. Viewers recommended her channel to friends. Other creators reached out to collaborate. Even artists in the industry began to take notice. One of those artists was Selena Gomez. Selena's stepfather, Brian Tiffy, had seen Christina's videos and was impressed. He reached out, eventually becoming her manager. The connection led to an opportunity for Christina to open for Selena on tour. A leap from her bedroom studio to performing for thousands in arenas. The transition could have been overwhelming, but Christina handled it with the same grounded presence she had at home. Backstage, she greeted crew members warmly. On stage, she carried herself with calm confidence, letting her music speak first. She began working on her own original material, blending pop hooks with the soulful depth that had always been her signature. Her first EP, Find Me, was released in 2011, further cementing her identity as more than a cover artist. Songs like Liar, Liar, and Unforgivable showcased her ability to write and perform music that was distinctly hers. Even as her profile rose, she stayed rooted in her family. Mark often toured with her, both as a guitarist and as a constant source of support. Tina called regularly, offering encouragement and keeping her connected to the values she had grown up with. Her fans, the Team Grimmy community, began to form their own bonds, sharing stories about how her music had helped them. Christina didn't just acknowledge their devotion, she embraced it. After shows, she stayed to meet as many people as possible, signing autographs, taking photos, and listening to their stories. By the time she turned 19, she had built something rare. Not just an audience, but a family of listeners who felt like they knew her. Her career was still climbing, and there were bigger stages ahead. But already, the young girl from Marlton had become a rising star. By the time Christina was 19, the momentum of her career had reached a point where staying in Marlton no longer seemed possible. Opportunities were calling from the other side of the country, and she knew she needed to be closer to where the industry lived and breathed. Los Angeles was where the stages were bigger, the collaborations were wider, and the chances to grow as an artist were limitless. The decision was not made lightly. New Jersey was home. Hitsakoro Kartorti, every street, every familiar face, every memory of where her journey began. Leaving meant stepping away from the comfort of that small town familiarity into a place where she would be just one voice among thousands trying to be heard. But Christina was ready. Her parents supported her choice, knowing that holding her back would be like asking her to silence her own voice. Mark, as always, was right by her side. The bond between the two was unshakable, and having him there gave Christina a sense of safety in the vast unknown of Los Angeles. Together, they navigated the challenges of starting fresh in a city that could be both inspiring and intimidating. Los Angeles was different in every way. The days were brighter, the pace faster, the faces unfamiliar. There was a constant hum of ambition in the air, a sense that everyone was chasing something, whether it was music, film, art, or a dream that had yet to take shape. Christina worked on her music with renewed focus. She spent hours in studios, collaborating with producers, exploring new sounds, and refining her style. She was determined to grow not just as a performer, but as a songwriter. Her sound matured, blending the pop influences that had shaped her early years with deeper, more personal lyricism. Her circle of friends expanded. She met fellow musicians, YouTubers, and performers who shared her passion for creating. Many of them admired her for her humility. Despite her growing profile, she treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were seasoned professionals or newcomers just starting out. The move also brought her closer to key opportunities. Her management team could now connect her to industry events, networking sessions, and shows that would have been impossible to attend from New Jersey. Christina embraced each chance, not with arrogance, but with gratitude. Life in Los Angeles wasn't without its challenges. The industry was competitive, and the pressure to stay relevant was constant. But Christina had a way of navigating it without losing herself. She refused to change her core values for fame. Her faith remained strong. Her relationship with her family remained close, and her connection to her fans never wavered. In 2014, another turning point arrived. Christina auditioned for The Voice. Her rendition of Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus made all four coaches turn their chairs within seconds. She chose Adam Levine as her coach, and from that moment, her career entered an entirely new chapter. The national television exposure introduced her to millions who had never seen her YouTube channel. Week after week, she performed live, adapting to different genres, and proving she could handle the pressure of performing in front of a massive audience. Her time on The Voice ended with a third-place finish, but the show had given her something even more valuable, a platform that stretched far beyond the internet. When the season ended, Christina didn't fade into the background as some contestants did. She used the momentum to tour, record, and continue building her own brand. Her move to Los Angeles had not only been the right choice, it had been essential. She was no longer just a YouTube star. She was an artist with national recognition and a growing career. Her appearance on The Voice had been more than just a career boost. It was a moment that crystallized everything Christina had been working toward. From the instant she stepped onto the stage for her blind audition, there was no hesitation. She walked out with quiet confidence, greeted the audience, and began to sing. The song was Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus, but it was Christina's version, stripped of its radio polish and filled with her own emotion. Before she had reached the chorus, all four coaches had pressed their buttons, their chairs turning in unison. The audience erupted, but Christina's focus stayed on the performance. Every note was steady, her tone unwavering, her control effortless. When the music stopped, the coaches fought for her. Each of them praised her voice, her stage presence, and her ability to take a popular song and make it her own. After listening to their pitches, Christina chose Adam Levine as her coach, a decision that would shape the rest of her journey on the show. Under Adam's mentorship, she tackled songs that challenged her range and versatility. Each week, she stepped onto that stage and delivered performances that were equal parts technical mastery and emotional honesty. She sang with the same sincerity she had on YouTube, but now with the polish of live television production behind her. The competition grew more intense as the weeks passed. Contestants were eliminated one by one, but Christina remained. Her voice was consistent, her arrangements carefully thought out, and her presence magnetic without being overbearing. When she reached the semifinals, the energy around her performances was electric. Fans across the country voted to keep her in the competition, rallying behind her not just because of her talent, but because of the warmth they sensed from her. She made it all the way to the finale, ultimately finishing in third place. It wasn't the top spot, but the exposure had been priceless. Millions of viewers now knew her name, and her fan base had grown exponentially. Christina left The Voice determined to keep the momentum alive. She went back into the studio, began writing and recording again, and booked performances wherever she could. The experience had shown her that she could hold her own alongside some of the best voices in the country. She also understood something deeper. The Voice had been a chapter in her story, but it was not the whole story. She wasn't there to be a reality show contestant forever. She was there to build a career that would last. After The Voice, Christina focused on her own music with renewed determination. She released new material, booked performances, and reconnected with her loyal Team Grimmy fans. Her shows were not just concerts. They were personal gatherings where she made time for everyone who waited to meet her. In 2016, she joined the Before You Exit tour as an opening act. It was a chance to connect with audiences across multiple cities, bringing her songs to both longtime fans and people hearing her for the first time. Mark was with her, as always, playing guitar and keeping close. Tour life was busy, but Christina embraced it. Each night, she gave her full energy to the performance, moving seamlessly between upbeat songs and stripped-down ballads. The venues were smaller than the arenas she had seen on The Voice, but that suited her. She preferred the intimacy, the way she could look out into the crowd and make eye contact with the people singing along. By early June, the tour was heading toward its Orlando stop. Christina was excited, not just for the show, but for the chance to meet more of the fans who had supported her since her YouTube days. Her meet and greets were always important to her. Unlike some artists who kept their distance, Christina welcomed hugs, conversations, and photos. On June 10, 2016, she arrived in Orlando with Mark. The Before You Exit crew was already at the Plaza Live venue preparing for the evening's performance. Christina, calm and smiling as ever, went through sound check, adjusting her mic, running through a few songs, and making sure everything felt right. The show itself went as planned. Christina's voice was strong, her energy light but engaging. Fans cheered, clapped, and sang along. She seemed in her element, completely at ease in the music. When the performance ended, she and Mark headed to the meet and greet area. A small line formed as fans clutched posters, CDs, and phones for photos. Christina greeted each person warmly, signing autographs, posing for selfies, and thanking them for coming. There was no rush. She gave each interaction her full attention. While Christina was on tour, meeting fans and performing night after night, there was someone else moving quietly in the background. Someone she had never met, but who had been watching her from a distance. His name was Kevin James Loibel. He lived in St. Petersburg, Florida, and those who knew him described him as quiet, withdrawn, and unusual in his behavior. Neighbors said he kept mostly to himself. He didn't socialize much, and when he did, conversations were often brief. Kevin worked at a Best Buy store. His coworkers noticed certain things about him, how he seemed fixated on certain topics, how he sometimes spoke about Christina Grimmie in a way that felt different from casual admiration. He mentioned her name often enough that it stuck in people's minds. Privately, Kevin had become obsessed. He watched her YouTube videos repeatedly. He followed her career, her interviews, her music releases. In his mind, the line between performer and personal acquaintance began to blur. Those who interacted with him later recalled that he seemed to believe there was some kind of connection between them, even though they had never spoken. In the weeks before the Orlando concert, Kevin made a plan. He bought 2 tickets for the Plaza Live show. He also purchased travel supplies, and most disturbingly, he acquired 2 firearms. Authorities would later determine that he brought both with him when he traveled to Orlando. On June 10, 2016, while Christina and Mark were preparing for the evening's performance, Kevin was making his way to the same venue. He arrived alone, blending into the audience. During the show, he stayed quiet, watching her from his spot in the crowd. When the music ended and the meet and greet began, Kevin got in line. Ahead of him were fans laughing, smiling, clutching posters and phones. Christina, as always, welcomed each one with a hug and a smile. She had no reason to think the man in line was any different from the others. Kevin stepped forward when it was his turn. Christina stood ready to greet him, just as she had greeted everyone else before him, with open arms and a smile. Witnesses would later recall that she leaned in to offer a hug, something she always did for her fans. It was then that Kevin pulled out one of the firearms he had brought with him. Without warning, he raised it and fired. The sound of the shots cut through the meet and greet area, sending people into shock and panic. Mark reacted instantly. Seeing his sister collapse, he lunged toward Kevin, tackling him to the ground in an attempt to stop the attack. In the struggle, Kevin turned the gun on himself and fired. The room erupted into chaos. Fans screamed and scrambled for cover. Security and crew members rushed in, shouting for people to get back. Some tried to help Christina. Others attempted to control the scene. Mark stayed beside her until help arrived. Emergency responders quickly moved in, tending to her and working to stabilize her condition. She was rushed from the venue to Orlando Regional Medical Center. Kevin was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities would later confirm that he had acted alone and that the attack had been premeditated. They found no prior contact between him and Christina. No messages, no meetings, no personal connection. At the hospital, doctors did all they could, but the injuries were too severe. Christina Grimmie was pronounced dead later that night. She was 22 years old. News of Christina's death spread quickly, first among fans who had been at the venue, then across social media, and within hours, around the world. Messages began to flood in from people who had followed her career from the beginning, as well as from those who had discovered her through The Voice. The shock was immediate and overwhelming. She had been young, talented, and full of life just hours earlier, greeting fans with the same warmth she always had. Now that warmth was gone, leaving a void that could be felt by strangers and loved ones alike. Her family was devastated. Mark, who had been there in those final moments, now had to face the unimaginable reality of life without his sister. Her parents, Albert and Tina, were left with a silence in their home that nothing could fill. Tributes poured in from fellow musicians, celebrities, and friends. Adam Levine, her coach on The Voice, expressed his grief publicly, calling Christina a natural and one of the kindest people he had ever met. Selena Gomez, with whom Christina had toured, broke down during a performance, dedicating a song to her friend. Fans organized vigils, lighting candles and singing the songs Christina had shared with them. Some played her music aloud in public spaces. Others posted videos of themselves covering her songs in tribute. It was their way of keeping her voice alive. In New Jersey, the community where Christina had grown up came together to honor her memory. Friends, neighbors, and local musicians gathered to share stories and remember the young girl whose voice had carried from a small bedroom to audiences around the world. In the days that followed, her funeral was held at Fellowship Alliance Chapel in Medford, New Jersey. It was a service filled with music, reflection, and deep sorrow. She was laid to rest in Berlin Cemetery, surrounded by family, friends, and a sea of flowers left by those whose lives she had touched. Even in her absence, her impact remained. Her YouTube channel saw an outpouring of new comments, fans leaving messages as if still speaking to her. Her songs were streamed millions of times, each play a small act of remembrance. In the weeks and months that followed, Christina's family and friends worked to ensure her life would be remembered for more than the way it ended. They focused on the kindness she had shown, the music she had created, and the way she treated people both on and off stage. The Christina Grimmie Foundation was established, dedicated to supporting families who had experienced the sudden loss of a loved one and to helping victims of gun violence. Through the foundation, Christina's name became a source of comfort and assistance for people facing their own tragedies. Her fans, Team Grimmie, remained active, organizing events, streaming her music, and sharing her performances to keep her memory alive. Some spoke about how Christina had inspired them to pursue music, while others credited her with helping them through personal struggles just by being herself. In the music industry, she was remembered as an artist with rare authenticity. Producers, fellow singers, and collaborators described her as someone who had no interest in fame for its own sake. She wanted to create, to connect, and to make people feel something through her work. Her family released unreleased recordings, giving fans a chance to hear songs she had worked on before her death. Each release felt like a final gift, a reminder of the talent and spirit the world had lost too soon. Awards and tributes continued over the years. She was posthumously honored at events, and her story was told in documentaries, interviews, and television specials. For many, her name became not just a memory, but a symbol of how one person's kindness and artistry can leave a lasting mark. Christina's life, from the small bedroom in Marlton, where she uploaded her first videos, to the national stage of The Voice, to the tours that brought her face to face with her fans, had been defined by connection. Even after her passing, that connection remained unbroken. Christina's story was one of dreams pursued with courage and heart. She had grown from a girl singing in her bedroom to a performer whose voice reached millions. Her talent was undeniable, but it was her warmth, humility, and openness that made people feel like they knew her personally. Those who had met her, whether at a concert, a meet and greet, or through a brief interaction online, often spoke about how she made them feel valued. She remembered names, asked questions, and treated everyone as if they mattered. That genuine care became as much a part of her legacy as her music. Her journey was not without challenges. She had faced the uncertainties of a music career, the pressures of public life, and the sacrifices that came with chasing her passion. Yet through it all, she remained grounded, leaning on her faith, her family, and the belief that music was a gift to be shared. The tragedy that ended her life left an ache in those who loved her, but it also sparked a commitment to honor her memory. Her family's foundation continues to help others, her music continues to inspire, and her story continues to be told, not as a cautionary tale, but as a celebration of a life lived with purpose. In the end, Christina Grimmie was more than an artist, more than a contestant on The Voice, more than a rising star. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and to countless people around the world, she was proof that kindness and talent can exist in equal measure. Her voice may have fallen silent, but the echoes remain. In the songs she left behind, in the memories of those who knew her, and in the lives she touched without even realizing it. And somewhere, in the hearts of her fans, Christina still stands on stage smiling, microphone in hand, ready to sing the next song. And that is the story of Christina Grimmie, a voice that touched millions, a life filled with kindness, and a legacy that will never fade. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. It's free, and it helps us bring you more true stories that matter. And if you know someone who would want to hear Christina's story, share this video with them. Let her voice and her spirit reach just one more person. Thank you for listening and for keeping her memory alive with me tonight. Till tomorrow, stay safe and take care.